Well, it's been a while, but it's time for a new edition of CSX 101. Hello again, rail fans, and welcome to episode 6 of my little series known as CSX 101. Today we'll be discussing CSX's recent symbol changes. At the beginning, it might seem difficult to remember or understand them, but this video should help a little bit to help you as a rail fan get used to these new train IDs. A huge thanks to my friends Max Stevens and Andrew Stevenson for providing most of the info for this video via lists and posts. With all that aside, let's jump into CSX 101, new symbol changes. Let's start out with some basics. Since about mid-March, CSX has been replacing all of its K symbol trains into B symbols to signify bulk commodities. These include phosphate and ethanol. Tampa's usual ethanol train is K423 off the Canadian Pacific in Bensonville, now resymboled as B621. The northbound empty version of this train will be a B622. Another Tampa ethanol pair will be B796 and B795, replacing the old uncommon K707 and 708 trains. As far as phosphate trains go, the B will also replace the K in these symbols as well. For some reason, these symbols actually make sense, as they've just replaced the letter prefix and not the 3-digit number that follows. An example would be the weekday Rockport to Ridgewood turn K311. It's now B311. The East Tampa to Agruck K339 is now B339. The phosphate train at 78th Street we see here is a K317, but now, you guessed it, it's B317. Okay, so those phosphates were pretty easy, and so are the new coal train symbols. The empty coal series or E series trains will stay the same, while the loaded trains will switch from N to C and T. For Florida, the Tampa-bound NO10 will now be CO10. The loaded train to Jacksonville will now be CO13, with its counterpart still being EO13. Boy, do I wish all these symbol changes were like this, because now we get into the trains that literally have nothing in common with their old IDs. Let's start with some A-series trains, specifically locals of North Florida and South Georgia. If you're a rail fan that visits Folkestone, you might notice now that the Waycross to Jacksonville turn, A764, is no longer calling out signals on the radio. This is because A764 doesn't exist anymore. Their new ID is L728. I'm still confused on why this symbol isn't used for the Tampa to Brooksville job. Technically, the symbol for 0728 should have just been L728, switching the O prefix with an L. But instead, we're making sure that all symbols are screwed over and confuse all of our employees. That's how I think CSX talks. Another example of an A-series symbol change is Wildwood Yard's very own local A782. This guy now runs as an L753. Now the night shift for this train is A785. This train would work customers north of Wildwood, usually in the Ocala area. So just a refresher, L753 is the daylight Wildwood and South switcher, while L754 is the nightly Wildwood and North switcher. Now for a new train. The old A771 and A770 pair are now L743 and L729. Now you might know by now that instead of these guys running from Brown Sand to Waycross, they run all the ways down here to Winston Yard in Lakeland, with the L729 train being the northbound counterpart of the 743. Here's what was A770 and now L729 crossing the interlocking at the Cordele Rail Park in March of this year, with 2 GE rebuilds sandwiching an EMD rebuild. Alright, now here's where the fun begins. What we used to know as the O-Series local for the Florida business area are now L, and also have completely new 3-letter digits. I'll go through this quickly, but if you need a chart of these new local symbols, there's a link in the description for a PDF link of the chart. Starting at the top, 0700 is now L755, traveling daily between Tampa and Drew Park. 0701, the Clearwater sub-switcher, is now L782, with the symbol for 0747 still unknown. 0704, the Temple Terrace Rock local, is now L778, and also has been going up the Navy Spur a little bit earlier, around 4 p.m. now, in front of Amtrak 92. This observation could be subject to change though. The tentative symbol for the Tropicana switcher is L777, replacing the old 0705. Again, the status on the symbol is subject to change. The Auburndale area switcher 0707 is now L784, with the Lakeland-based 0708 now L762. The Tampa-based Plant City S-Line switcher 0709 is now L779, with the A-Line switcher 0710 now L780. I wouldn't blame you if you've stopped watching at this point. For the locals I don't have clips for, 0711 is L763, 0712 is now L764, 0713 is L765, and the list continues in this order until 0719. 719, the CH Spur local, is now L766, with the Miami-based 0721 now being L789. The Winston to Arcadia transfer job 0725 is now L768. My Brooksville sub-local is now L781, and has been leaving Tampa around 8 p.m. now. So much for the hopes of a sunset chase through Lutz. The Winston-based Bone Valley local 0730 is now L769, with the Mulberry switcher 0731 being L770. 0738 is now L772, now a weekday-only train. 0750, the Palmetto switcher, is L783 and also operates on weekdays. Last but not least, the new Winston to Palm Center Autorack job, or 0760, is now L773. The two Tampa terminal yard jobs that usually run down to Rockport are R642 and R645. I really have no idea why these are R, not L, but nothing really makes sense at this point. Yard switchers are still the same, with the old port switcher Y295 keeping his symbol. Yes, I did leave a good amount of locals out, but the ones I did cover are the symbols that you need to know for Central Florida rail fanning along the CSX. Finally, let's move to the all-new M prefixes. By now, everyone should know that the intermodal trains have switched from Q to I, and the now remaining Q trains are getting replaced by M symbols. Now, thankfully, all of Central Florida manifest trains are only switching the prefix and not the 3-digit numbers. So just like the phosphate trains and coal moves, the letter is the only thing that changes. Tampa's Q442 is now M442. Miami's Q452 is now M452. Orlando's Q455 is now M455. Q441 is now M441, 453 is M453, Q604 is M604, and so forth. Now, something that hasn't changed since early November are the G symbols, specifically for Tampa grain trains. The loaded and empty letter prefixes for grain trains will stay G, with the numbers also staying the same. In conclusion, a symbol like G575 will stay the same for at least the foreseeable future. And after all of that, this CSX 101 episode finally comes to a close. I thank you all for watching, and hopefully you gained some new knowledge from this video. But until we meet again, this is Christian from Multicolor Films. End of transmission.